Xenia Kalpaktsoglou, and I'm a curator and a writer, and my main identity for the last 11 years has been co-founder and director of the Athens Biennale. And the Athens Biennale is like any other biennial, but it was based on it was founded on a very unorthodox way by an artist, an art critic, and myself, a curator. So it's one of those success stories, or success beginnings actually, of bottom-up, independent self-organization, you name it. I recently stepped down of the Biennale in July 2016, and I think 10% is part of the motherhood, unreconcilable differences, and the precarity of the profession that Brigitte has very eloquently put in place, and I could speak a lot about this, I think, but not on the freelance sector, on the how it is to live like this, but also in terms of responsibility, but beyond the ethical, arguments of what it means to work within the cultural industry, and how responsible you are for the structure that you're sustaining, and how responsible you are for the culture you're producing or fostering. So I think the second part, the fostering or the production that you're sustaining, has been for me an unbearable responsibility because of the lack of financial or strong funding opportunities to support the artists. But this was always a negotiation that I have learned to live with. I always thought also that making statements through culture, because I had this, and I'm going to read my initial thoughts, that exhibitions were sites for self-reflexive artistic practices, culturally inclusive discourses, and critical articulations of differences. I was going out by this, this trinity, and little by little, when I became involved in setting up an organization and actually running it, everything came crashing down on my face. I think partly is because of Greece being in a very particular country, in a very particular condition, but nonetheless, I think, yes, we are an image of the future, unfortunately for all of you, but we are also an image of the present. So I don't know where to start. I can use some anecdotes to light up the conversation. Like, I was always the girl in the middle. Every time we were introducing who we are, people used to say, oh, 2 guys and a girl. So that was like the main perception in the first 2 years of what the company was. But jokes aside, I would like to say that now, looking back, I think in the collaboration scenario, 3 is a better number, or more numbers. However, I tended as a woman to work both as a fire blanket during tantrums or real arguments. So I had to be the pacifier, or the one that brings together sense in a kind of motherhood, situation. Or I was more, how can I say, both because I was a curator, which means I take care of stuff, but that was very convenient also for my identity, that I would have to clean up, meaning like most of the admin situation has to do with this, or even in small organizations that are I think where people are multitasking, which is, I hate this word, when people are performing all sorts of roles. So you do need to check out the opening, but you also need to check out the toilet paper. That is a spectrum of activities that when you're a woman, you kind of as a reflex reaction undertake. I never thought that was possible, but yeah, now looking back, like through your talks, who did the supermarket list or the stationery list, or who was dealing with difficult situations in banks, in the tax office, all the time it was like this kind of movement. When we became 2, the situations became even more complicated, because without having, let's say, without being a couple with somebody or having this kind of relationship, everything is based on friendship, which I would also like to emphasize is something that we could bring in on top of empathy, let's say, which is something very important. That friendship for me has been an identifying factor, or a definitive factor in how I have been working. And in that I have been privileged. I mean, also given my kind of over-the-top description, with these 2 of my colleagues were good friends. I think I was well respected. I mean, we were always joking with stereotypes, and we have a lot of sense of humor, which means we have probably developed a sense of humor in order to overcome these difficulties or this division between us. So I think that was a must. But after 10 years of struggling within the arts and seeing that the culture we produce, or I was fighting for production, was replicating a lot of the models, I thought that maybe I could be more interested, and this is what I focused in the last 3 years, of actually working not horizontally for the organization, like for the extrovert part, the program, which was my primer, let's say, also though concern. I decided to cancel one of my, or maybe my primer identity, in order to kind of work vertically on the organization and say, like, this is the time to explore roots. We can see how this organization can be sustainable, but at the same time be sustainable through different ways, because I think the failures of self-organized or small companies is that we replicate large institutional models within our own model in order to be able to keep up with what's going on. This creates an unprecedented, workload, and it's also it creates inhumane conditions of working. So it's not only that you volunteer or you work for free, and I think out of the 16 years that I've been active in the profession, I roughly counted that I have been paid for the 4. So, I mean, and not continuously. I mean, the 4, like, in fragments within the 16 years. So yeah, this is a problem. So I think maybe we can move the conversation forward by including everything that was said before, because I don't have a lot to add on the theoretical level, but including all this kind of integration or other words that are a la mode, the collaboration, as a form that doesn't maybe have a lot, but is ascribed a lot of feminine characteristics. There are examples in the cultural field of cooperative models that are run by women, particularly, the UK alliance between the Showroom Gallery, the Chisenhale Gallery, and also the Tensa Konsthall in Sweden. They have formulated a network called How to Work Together. And they have also created, in Casco, in Utrecht, and they're all run by women on the directorship position, and they were the first one who initiated this kind of programs of not only discussing about it, but creating informal meetings between staff, setting costs for commissions. So they also tried to tidy up, or in a sense make things viable for themselves. In the process, though, they stopped only doing this for the work, but like I mentioned to you, which is something that I was very interested in, tried to see how the work that we were producing, and it's short-lived, particularly biennial, they have this pants and run scenario. We make these short-lived utopias for 60 days. Like we all know, culture has no real power, or is not perceived as real power, so they don't take us seriously. They leave us in their own devices. Sometimes they give us corporate money because it's social responsibility for them, and it's a safety valve for them, so everybody's happy. So in that sense, you're finding yourself in a situation where if you wake up one day to really think where you are positioned, it's impossible to move forward. So for me, I thought one idea of being able to move forward would be to structurally change the way we operate as an organization. So in the beginning, you have to imitate, because you act like a Trojan horse, you have to look like the big boys, or you have to be like Ocean's 11, like you're relevant. You go into the casino and you think, okay, yeah, I'm moving forward, nobody's going to stop me, I'm going to reach the blackjack table, I'm going. So yeah, you have to dress the part, and we have done it, I think, both male and female. But after a while, when you're there, if the game is played by the same rules, it's just gambling. So we just need to change the game. So changing the game is not easy, I realized, and I'm actually now more and more convinced that I'm not sure whether you can change the game from the inside. Because I had the impression that by creating an almost institution, I could definitely co-create it, actually, which was even better. I could infiltrate, but I'm not certain. So I have a lot more questions now, and it's very short, my departure. So the last 3 months have been really torn between whether we are co-opted in the cultural sector or whether we are kind of like a pop song saying, standing in the way of control. Thank you.
You have a long experience, and if you imagine my 15-year-old daughter comes to you and says, hey, I want to get into this cultural world, what advice would you give her? And if then my 13-year-old boy would come, what advice would you give him? So
I wouldn't give them different advices, I think. I would say that it's a very difficult decision to make. It's a still it's a very stratified profession. I think I'm one of the few people that are middle class, and so being middle class and freelance, I think, you know, it's a difficult situation. It's also the way the profession has been molded, like Bridget very well said. It used to be like working in the culture for women was a good thing to do, or it looked like a proper job until you do a family, or it was almost like a nice thing, because usually the perception was up until, I don't know, 20 years ago, the gallerist, you know, like this, the gallerist. So yeah, I mean, even the Sex and the City has the gallerist as a typeface, you know, somebody who is like the romantic guy, who brings empathy, but at the same time, main goal in life is to get married, have a house in the Hamptons, live happily ever after. And then also during Sex and the City, she cannot even sustain her job in the high New York society, so she's like, because she can afford it, she can be a docent, so she kind of volunteers for MoMA. I mean, these are all very difficult conditions. I would say to them the same thing, stratified, difficult to see whether you're doing actually change, because I think everybody who's in here on this afternoon, we believe that art can change the world. Culture is the primary force where we can change things. And then all of a sudden when you start applicating this, you're thinking that, and you leave the process, you think that you're aesthetically predictable, politically bankrupt, and economically unsustainable. So I don't know. In that respect, I mean, yeah. And we have also the privilege for this kind of ivory tower criticism, you know, because we have been so good in developing within our field criticism on institutions, production, equality, etc. We have become victims of our own criticization. So institutions cannot sustain themselves now. We are treated with a lot of suspicion for all the other grassroots communities that we try to embrace or come in terms with. What else? Yeah, you see, I'm going through, I mean, it's really tough for me because after doing something for 10 years, it's the second time I'm presenting, and thank God I didn't present it, what I used to be. I think I'm in a process of becoming myself, and this is the sincere thing to share with you. So I don't know if I can give advice, because sometimes I've tried to give advice to a lot of people, and it looks like people want to have their own experience of things. Particularly if you give them advice as a woman, best case scenario they look at you as a mother, worst case scenario they look at you like you're, you know, interfering too much. So yeah, I mean, I would say good luck to them, but let's help them, because they're still 13, to reach a point in this profession, to create an entry point for them that looks a lot different than the entry point that we had.
And how would that entry point look? I'm aware this is a very difficult question.
What do you mean?
Ideally, we know the situation is not very flattering right now. So ideally, this different entry point, how would that look? What kind of conditions would be ideal for you?
I don't know. I think a better balance between art and life would be best. Not idealizing the one or feeling like you're sacrificing the other. Like how these things are continuously feeding each other in a non-stop scenario, and we also help with the circulation without feeling like we're mouses on a wheel.
And the other strategy you had was Ocean's 11.
Yeah, I mean, I will go for Bell. Like, the temporary takeover is a very historical, strategy of people who are taking over. They usually say it's going to be for a little while, and then things is going to be changing. But we come from countries with really, bad history when it comes to political takeovers and very recent history. Like, I think we are the products of the first generation of not living the dictatorship. So, I mean, I'm very... how can I say? I'm not comfortable with the takeover when I put it in context, but as an attitude, I do have it, and I have practiced it as much as I wanted to. Didn't create a lot of friends for me, but if you do it once, you're arrogant enough, so I'm in.
It's funny because in the right before the dictatorship, right before the war in Spain, which started in 1936. There was a Republican government that was actually doing lots of advances in gender equality, for example, and people in Spain had rights that people in Switzerland have just acquired in the 80s. So it's it was a pity then that the ones who took over went like 200 years before. So it was a different kind of taking over, though. Would you like to comment a little bit more, or should we open? I don't know how long we have because I don't have a watch with me.
One quick comment because you mentioned Switzerland.
Oh no!
I'm not going to go into the corner of Switzerland. I'm not going to do that, especially because I'm German anyway. But what I wanted to say is one of our top performing organizations when it comes to gender equality is in Switzerland. And the lesson that I just wanted to share is that the situation in the macroscopic environment does not have to determine how good you are in the microscopic. That's a very important point, that you can build a wonderful environment of equality, diversity and inclusion, even in, well, not the worst, but in not so ideal circumstances. It shouldn't hold you back. So, yeah.
Maybe your last...
Well, I wondered, you said from all of your knowledge and now you're reflecting back, and you said changing the game, we have to change the game, yes. But then you said, but now I'm not sure if we can change the game from the inside. Can we change it from the outside or from somewhere else entirely? Not inside or outside? Some third space?
I don't think we're here to find solutions, but deliberately I'm non-conclusive, as you probably understood.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think that if there are two positions that are antagonistic, you'd have necessarily to take sides. But knowing these kind of two, or we would be glad if there were two, but knowing these kind of antagonistic positions, we might find other ways to maneuver between them. Yeah, so it's not an either-or situation, like previously our nice colleague said. It's not an either-or, like mother or career woman, or black or white. Or it's not that easy. I wish it were in life that easy. I mean, it would be very comforting if we were still living in this kind of dualities. Yeah, but because life has become a lot more nuanced, I think we have to look at it in another way. But I'm not certain. With your help, I think, and your help, and everybody's practicing, I don't know if in our lifetime it will be achievable, but it's worth the effort, no? It could be fun.